Uh, this afternoon we are going to have a session with Dr. Yong Hui.
Prof. Yong, yeah.
Prof. Yong Hui.
Yeah.
And it is an honor to have you with us, Prof. Yong Hui. I am Arya and will be the moderator for this afternoon session. Today's session is special because the topic will be the lean innovation in supply chain management during pandemic. And as we know that the pandemic create many disruptive in many processes, both in Indonesia, Malaysia, and I believe it is a worldwide problem. And Professor Yong Hui will present her concern, her perspective on this issue. Before Professor Yong Hui deliver her speech, I would like to introduce Professor Yong Hui. Professor Yong Hui is the Dean of the Faculty of Business and Finance in University of Tunku Abdul Rahman in Malaysia, one of the largest faculties in the country. It is an honor to have you, Professor Yong Hui, in this session. Professor Yong Hui received her doctoral degree in University Science Malaysia, her master degree of arts in University of Kuba, and Bachelor of Science in Universiti Pertanian Malaysia. Dr. Yong Hui is the Max Scholars. She was honored with the Tun Razak Youth Leadership Award. She also received Best Paper Awards and Best Oral Presentation Award in South Korea in the United Kingdom. Professor Yong Hui is published papers in international referred journal and proceeding. More than 30 journal papers already published, indexed in Thomson Reuters, ISI, Web of Science, and Scopus. Professor Yong Hui is involved in several consulting and research projects. Professor Yong Hui provided consultation services to overseas and domestic organizations in Japan, overseas vocational training, also the Federation of Malaysia Chinese Guilds Association. And since 2015, she has won a number of grants, totally approximately 600,000 ringgit Malaysia in Southeast Asia, in Southeast and South Asia. The CV of Professor Yong Hui is really great. So we believe that Professor Yong Hui will deliver a good perspective for this issue. Prof. Yong Hui, the time is yours. And in the next 45 minutes, you may deliver your perspective on the issue. Please, thank you. Let us give applause to Professor Yong Hui.
Thank you, Professor Arya. Thank you for your kind introduction. Can you see the share screen from my side?
Yes, you can see that.
The share screen is okay. Your voice is also clear. You may proceed.
So thank you for inviting me to this section. I was given the topic about the lean innovation in supply chain management during pandemic. And for this session, I would like to share about when we think about the lean innovation, we will also have to think about the risk management. Because the lean innovation has been in the supply chain, I think we think about the concept for the past 20, 30 years. And we would like to, I would like to introduce about the balance of the lean thinking with the risk management. So the content for today will be about some of the potential operation impact of the unexpected events and critical elements of the risk and the business continuity strategies. and the responses of during the COVID pandemic against the supply chain risk management. Supply chain is a very important for the operation of a company, and supply chain disruption happen. Some great disruption happened in the past. For example, within the last 10 years, with the rare earth issue in 2010, during that time there was some imposition of the quota from China on the rare earth export. And we know that rare earth is a very important raw material to be used in the electrical and electronic supply chain and the products. And in 2011, there is a Tohoku earthquake in Japan. And later of the year, there is also a great flood in Thailand. And in the last 2 to 3 years, when it was started with President Trump in America, there is U.S.-China trade war. And now, from last year, there is the COVID-19 pandemic. And all these great events could give issues and challenges to the supply chain. This is some example of the estimated price or the loss if there is any disaster. During the Japan earthquake and the tsunami, it was estimated of the cost was about $210 billion. In the Thailand floods, it was about $30 billion. And there are some others, smaller size, the natural disaster of earthquake in New Zealand, tornadoes in US, and other floods in Australia. But if the disaster happened in the Asia, because Asia is one of the centers of the supply chain or the global value chain, so it could give impact to the industry. And some of the reason or causes of the disruption are, for example, IT outages, IT disconnection. It could be adverse weather, tornadoes, floods, typhoon, okay, or it could be cyber attack. And like in this, we also have heard about this. In the US, some of the power generation the company was held ransom by the hackers. So these could be the disruption due to the cyber attacks. And loss of talents or skills, meaning that it could be happen if there are migration to outside of the country or some staff member resign from the company. Another area could be the transportation network disruption, as like what we are having now especially in the US, 40% of the ships are waiting to unload to be uncargo near to the Los Angeles port. So there are some of this disruption of the supply chain that it happened before and it could happen in the future. And depends on the company and country, we may face different type of this kind of challenges. Then but if we know it happened in the past, what can we do in the future? We can't prevent on the certain disaster happen, but whether we let the situation controls you or how you can control the situation. Control in the sense that to minimize the damages. So in terms of the risk management, very importantly is to look at, okay, what are the impact of the risk event. The impact could happen to the people. It could be the employees. It could happen to the suppliers or the customers. The impact could be on the premises, means the premises, especially for example, fire earthquake or flood, it will give damages to the premises. In terms of the processes, it may happen when especially short of certain raw materials. And it may happen to the final products if there is some disruption happen on the transportation or logistics. Therefore, for any of these events, in order to control the situation, we got to have the risk management and how to use the risk management. Meaning that for the event that could happen, we have to understand and identify the source of the risk. The source of the risk could happen to the strategic risk, meaning that it could happen among the top management that could impact on the decision making. It could happen on the tactical risk on your certain project, for example, your new product development, or it could happen on the source at the operation risk, meaning that the day-to-day operation on your production line or the processes. Another risk is on the compliance. I think for this one, somehow people take it for granted and may forget about it. Compliance risk. It could happen on for some company, you may have the ISO certificate 9001, 14001, you may have a 31001, and whether there is the breach of the compliance, or basically how about the law. For any company, there are many laws to comply. It could happen like the labor laws, it could happen on the employment laws, it could happen on the vehicles, the building, business legislation, and so on. For the sustainability of the company, compliance issue must be paramount to the management. After identifying the sources of the risk, then have to also estimate what kind of consequences that happen that could impact to the company. It could have the consequences could be in terms of financially, meaning that loss of the revenue, maybe damages of the buildings, okay, financial impacts. Another is on the infrastructure. For example, certain disaster, earthquake, typhoon, floods, it could give impact to the infrastructure of the company. Another one, reputational. This looks this is not physical. Okay, sometimes people may forget about it, but for the top management managers like you have to think about the reputational consequences of it. For example, like we have the compliance risk. Some of the if you are doing some food production, some of the ingredients may be let's say is outdated, maybe already obsolete, but you use the raw material for your food production, and at the end the product is sold to the market, but it is not the standard quality. And if the consumer discover about it, then your reputations, your brand image will be heavily impacted. So sometimes some companies may want to save money to use raw material that is already obsolete. But if you still use it, that may give big impact to your brand image. So you have to think about the consequences of it. And marketplace, your customer base, your market share. Okay, so whether any change in this will impact. For example, if there is some disruption happen on the logistics supply chain, you may not be able to send your product to certain area, and you may lose certain customer in certain area. So these are just some example of the risk, resources, and the consequences that you have to consider in the risk management. And the impact of any disaster, it could be in many ways. impact not just certain section. Actually, it can happen and impact to more interruptions, to the loss of employees, for impact to your productivities. And I think the most severe is the competitor may take the market share due to the business interruption. If you cannot supply, but they can get from another alternate source, you may lose your customer forever. So therefore, very importantly, when we think about more efficiency, we think about the risk control as well. And be disaster resilience, it is encouraged that the risk management should be from both ways, top down as well as the bottom up. Like we have the the sources and the risk consequences, means that we must have our risk management framework. The framework will identify what are the events, what are the sources of risk a company may face, and then what are the possibilities it can happen, and if it happen, what are the consequences. So you have to build up your risk management framework. And for each of the activities or processes, there are certain risks that can bring to the organization, and you will have, with this risk management framework, you would see which is the biggest impact in the consequences to the company. And somehow for this risk management framework, it is not enough to do from the top down, because somehow top down you look at things differently, you look at things that is strategically, tactically. When we do this risk management exercise, also involve the employees or the workers from each of the department, bottom up, by we are having this business impact analysis and to find out the operational risk. Because for the top down, you may look at bigger picture, for example, loss of reputation, but there are some very important information that can be collected from the bottom up is on the operational risk. So who will experience more exposure to the supply chain disruptions? So for those company with the single sourcing, means that they have maybe one main supplier, okay, or the company that have more outsourcing, means that every processes they have a certain outsource to certain outside supplier, tier 1, tier 2 supplier. Company that have more product and portfolio introduction, they have many production line, they have many different type of product selection, many product portfolio, okay. Another higher risk are those company with a more manufacturing footprint, means that they have a different production plant in different area, or those company with extending global supply chain, means that they have a different component, for example parts from different country. For example, you may get some parts component from China, from Malaysia, from Thailand, from Philippines, in order to build your own product. When your product involve global supply chain, then there will be higher risk exposure. And also we talk about the lead times. When we have before the millennium, very important, we talk about shortened lead time, we talk about the JIT, just in time, and we talk about the very short, very less keeping of the inventory, lead to the like leaner inventories, so that we want to lessen the burden on financially. And we want to have a very fast this reaction or the supplies from our suppliers. So in normal time or in the more peaceful time, these are the area that we can say that is a more GIT, more lean. But in opposite side, actually it gives you greater exposure to the supply chain disruption. So therefore, we talk about lean, talk about how to balance with the risk, because one risk actually could destroy the whole company. One event may destroy the whole company if we do not have the planning of a balancing lean with the risk management. So in order to control the risk, we talk about the supply chain risk management. Generally, we need to identify what kind of the could be the source of the risk. We have to quantify it. For example, in the you have maybe 200 employees in a company. Some of them maybe stay in near to maybe 100 people stay near your hostel, and maybe another 50 people stay maybe within 10 kilometers, another 50 people stay 20 kilometers. If flood happen near to company, so how many people will be impacted? So you have to quantify the risk. Without quantifying the risk, very difficult you make a rational or objective judgment. Just sometimes one of the shortage of this the risk management is less of the quantification, just by the feeling. That is very important, that we have to quantify to have a better risk management. And once we quantify it, we will have to think about what are the control measures, how to reduce the impact. Then we talk about the mitigate. Mitigate means that how to what are our control plan, okay, and what kind of risk that we can accept, what kind of risk that we cannot accept. And then if it happen, then we do the response of it, and then we do it regularly, because risk management just not one time that we do, then that is we forget about it. We have to review, for example, regularly by yearly, for example. So when we talk about the win thinking, we talk about the inventory cost, and also when we talk about flexibility. So it is important that when we want to control our inventory by lean, we have to think about the flexibility and also the vulnerability that could happen to the company. So therefore, they must have a balance. So how to make the balance? Then you have to do the risk management and do the your prioritization. So the lean and the resilience of the supply chain, there is a trade-off. Okay, but how to make a balance? We want somehow most often they want to control better profit efficiency by the lean. However, if you are too lean and there is some supply chain disruption, you may lose your market share. So therefore, we must use this supply chain risk management to balance out with our level of resilience. How we can face it when we facing different risks or event, we can mitigate or reduce the impact to the company. So the company have to practice this risk management to have an optimal state of the system. Too much lean, okay, if normal time, of course, can save and give a lot of profit. But in the emergency time, if you may lose your market share just within a short time. Therefore, do the balancing. So just now we talk about for the resilience, there is from the top down as well as the bottom up. Okay, so during the preparation, you prepare some of the form or formats that for the input from the top as well as from the bottom from the employees. Identified by giving a list of the risk, the source of the risk, activities. You can do it by activities. You can divide it to your department. You may have a finance department, you have the warehouse, you have a production department, you have engineering department, you have purchasing department. By each of the department, list down the activity, and then from the activity, list down what could be the risk event that could happen, and do the analysis, give the quantifying score to the each of the event, and prioritize the risk of the risk. Also design a response for each of the risks for the mitigation plan. And then we do the monitoring and control regularly. So for when doing this quantification, you can look at this. There are two areas to look at: the business impact as well as the probability. Somehow, it's up to the company. You may have give a score of 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 for different probability. How often it could happen, and business impact, how severe it can happen. You can give quantification by giving the score. Then you multiply the score to get the score. Then from that you list by the priority by the score. And design for the responses. Then you think about the balance of the between the lean and also the resilience. Many tools can be used. For the most simple one, every company can do is using the spreadsheet, okay, to have a risk register. And some company may balance the balance scorecard, that using the balance scorecard to capture the company strategy in terms of the customer, in terms of the processes, in terms of the learning, and also financially, the four pillars of the balance scorecard. Or some using system, using the dashboard, okay, and some using the software, and some using the enterprise risk management software. So it depends on the investment allocated for the risk management, but everybody can do. The most simple one is using the spreadsheets. But of course, when your company go bigger, you may need software to help you. That is once a way about what are the approach that have been practiced. These are according to the survey by the PwC. 20% of the firm is ad hoc, means that basically there is unstructured risk management, meaning that there is a very minimum risk management. And look like in terms of the, for those more successful company, they have a more mature in terms of risk management, that 50% of the firm have are reactive, meaning that they can address risk in case of the crisis with defined structures. They have the people, they have the department, they have the channels, they have the processes to address the risk. And 25% of the companies have that are proactive, that they can have anticipatory risk management by dedicated procurement and other employees, as well as the balance is they have a cross-functional, which they have a more complicated preparation on the risk involvement of the cross functions along the risk management value chain, managed by dedicated supply chain risk management unit. So if the company would like to have a better sustainability of the operations and profitability, so therefore have to invest on the risk management. And it is important for a company to be to have business continuity plan. Business continuity is the capability of the organization to continue delivery of products or services at acceptable predefined levels following a disruptive incident. I think this is mainly we experience it when the COVID-19 sudden break in 2020. A lot of companies got unprepared, that they find difficulty on the how to continue the business to serve the customers. And for when we talk about the risk management, when you involve the supplier, please build out this BCP, business continuity plan, one for your own company, and also request on your suppliers. So with this business continuity plan, there will be have the stages of the where we first happen, for example, COVID-19, you should have a plan. Okay, activate the business continuation plan and use to close down after we can the operation can be somehow serve the customers. This plan is prepared before the event happen, means that during the risk management there are some event that it may happen, some pandemic, it may not be COVID, it could be like H5N1, H1N1. So these are the preparers where we have risk management, and together with it is the BCP, business continuity plan, and this also impose on your supplier. Your action of the business resilience in, of course, at the moment of happen, put the safety of the people at the priority. Communication with your stakeholders, including your customers, your suppliers, okay, as well as your creditors and the investors, your bank, okay, very important. And third, to have reshape the strategy to maintain business continuity. So during when the COVID pandemic break out, so I think many companies shift to work online, to work from home. Okay, so but that you need the certain infrastructure of the company that they allow access offsite, for example. Okay, and the fourth action taken for the business resilience of the pandemic is to build resilience from prepare for the recovery. So like current situation in the COVID is we are building up for the recovery. So we have to update our BCP, have to make a decision to take action during the crisis and recovery. And also, you also, as I mentioned, you can impose it on your supplier to request them to have a BCP. With your policy, establish your system, and also provide the training and exercise to your own employees. You can request the same to your supplier. And the plan is prepared for the different area, including the building, communication, information system, ERP system, safety verification, stocks, and also restoration of the lifeline. So means that the plan prepare for the risk source or risk event that you have identified. And during the pandemic is the established communication. Before the pandemic, people come to office, come to the company, come to the production. But during the COVID, everybody, you support the company from many of them from work from home. Then you need to communicate with them. So what is their, for example, their phone number? What is their email, personal email? What is their fixed line phone number? Do you have it on hand? And your line in your line of a command. There was another survey done in the 2019 that 71% of the organization they had a business continuity arrangement. 54%, okay, in UK, that good procurement practices are imperative to the financial success. And 68% say that the value of the function for both business revenue and saving, as well as a working life easier. So these are the business continuation plan, BCP. You have the risk management, then you have the BCP. This will help companies recover faster and mitigate the risk better than other companies. When we talk about supply chain, very important is in the logistic. I think now the whole world is facing this supply chain risk or the logistic risk because of the congestion and the turnaround of the container. So for the risk, identify the event. It could be related to the regulatory, politically, or the reputation the event. And operation risk is on the supply continuation. I think this is one of the main issue currently we face. Inventory access, system support, process continuation, human capital availability. Let's say you have employers whether the employees can take over another person's job easily. Because especially during the COVID-19, some people may be infected by the COVID. Then whether another person can take over the job that your operation not impacted. Because this event may cause your loss of the right to operate, loss of the trade preference status, shipment loss, shipment delay, or labor of the cost closure, or the cost the port closure go to the due to physical issue, like the turnaround in the Los Angeles port. So therefore, in your risk management, think about the mitigation, the monitoring, the intervention, the crisis management, and resumption, the recovery, the business continuation. Okay, so for any this disruption happen, first emergency is to save your company, because we understand that during the when the beginning of the COVID-19, when the suddenly lockdown, some of your inventory may be damaged. For example, some they need some let's say the air conditioning or the temperature control. If you forget about it, you take off all the shutdown, all the electricity, you may damage of your product or your raw material. Okay, so that therefore during the emergency response, while we protect our life of the employees, think about we also have to protect our premises and the equipment. And during the crisis, also think about the to protect our brand, and also to have this communication with public, with the supplier and customer, and business recovery to ensure ability to serve the customer continuously. So in one of the consultant essential give the how to tackle the disruption. It could happen like first you must have the cross-functional, just how we talk about the cross-functional team for your risk management, that we can respond and then reset, and also to continue to have a control over the event. And from the supply side, okay, mobilize a control to orchestrate the supply chain operation, because how to get different sources for your raw material, for example. Okay, and in terms of the manufacturing, how to increase the safety measure during the restart. Okay, and also prepare the protocol to accelerate the shift to the emergency mode of the risk event. And with that, like mentioned before, you must have invest certain capital, so that you have the liquidity of the cash flow to maintain operation, as well as for those let's say involved in the manufacturing of the cars, whether how to maintain the sales during the event. So about how to balance the lean with the resilience. So the top four of the measures are regarding the dual sourcing, meaning that you may have some source from China, not only depend on China, for example, you also get the second source from other country like Japan or maybe Malaysia. Okay. Secondly, is increase inventory of the critical product. So when lean, we talk about the minimum safety stock. Then how to have a more buffer of it when we think about the supply chain may be disrupted, and the longer the lead time. Think about the near sourcing expanding supplier base, meaning that have a supplier which is closer to your plant or closer to your country. And regionalizing supply chain means that in the past, maybe the component, the raw material may come from another region, but have it, for example, near to the ASEAN, so that it is nearer in the distance that can control better. So, and also some others measure could be reduce the number of the SKUs in product portfolio, higher inventory along supply chain, backup production, nearshoring, increase number of the distribution center, warehousing. Okay, so you see, it's a very difficult action to balance the lean and also the resilience. And in current trend is to have this the regional free trade, like we have the ASEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and also the CPTPP, Comprehensive and the Progress Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. For those multinational companies, for example, in the related to the current issue of the semiconductor, so normally they have a regional supply chain distributing wafer in different countries, like Singapore or maybe China or Taiwan, and the distributing the chip assembly and testing in other countries like Malaysia, Vietnam. So the supply chain, on example on the semiconductor, is involving different countries. For example, in for Apple smartphone, they are having some supplier in Malaysia. Even though the Apple the phone production is not in Malaysia. These are the supplier, including the apps, Evident, Molex, On, Infineon, Intel, Panasonic, Renesas, Sonos, Luminet, ROM, TI, Texas Instruments, Micron, Murata, Taiyo Yuden. They supply component for the Apple phone. So if anything happen in the Malaysians, we do not produce Apple phone, but it is part of the global value chain. And about the semiconductor just now, the top is the TSMC from Taiwan. But there are also IDM like Intel or Texas Instruments, and fabless companies such as AMD, okay, and the outsourced semiconductor assembly and testing companies such as Broadcom, Infineon, Intel, Ostrom, AMD, Agilent, Renesas, and Robert Bosch. And Malaysia is a center of the chip testing and packaging, okay, with companies like Infineon, ST Micron, and XP. Malaysia is one of the top 10 countries in the semiconductor country, accounting for about 7% of the global trade and 30% of the global capacity. And the E&E is the 39% of the export. So you can see this is the local company involved in the semiconductor supply chain in Malaysia in terms of IC design, in terms of the wafer fabrication, in terms of the packaging and testing. This is the main one, okay, as well as the EMS, the electronics manufacturing services. And also not to forget about the ecosystem of the semiconductor. We have the sub-value chain supporting activity of the high-performance testing socket company and AT equipment company. So this also involved in the supply chain of the semiconductor. In this year, early this year in Texas, you remember the winter storm, okay, that caused the disruption at the Texas on the supply chain. And in the first half of the year, also the Taiwan also impacted by the heat wave and drought and stock, and also the power cut. So it also impacted the semiconductor. For Malaysia, 2 months before in August, it was the peak of the COVID-19 cases. So we have almost more than 20,000 cases per day. And that causes, now we have the, along the supply chain are the on semiconductor, Infineon production, they are impacted because of the COVID-19 lockdown. And also, the supply chain disruption in the semiconductor caused the disruption in the car market, car manufacturing. Talk about the chip shortage, the chips faces a new crunch of this because of the close down or the employees being infected with the COVID.
Professor Au Yong Hee, the time is next 2 minutes.
Okay, it's a finishing soon. Okay,
Yeah,
so therefore the Taiwan also informed that Malaysia is also important in the supply chain of the semiconductor. And the Bosch says that the car industry supply chain no longer work. So what happened is that a different country involved in the global supply chain on the semiconductor. Malaysia is at, you can see at the bottom of it, the ATP, assembly, testing, and packaging. And these are the solutions that could help in terms of the recovery from the business cycle of the semiconductor, in terms of the geography, location, planning, supplier, manufacturing, product, platform, transportation, and also financial and working capital. This is on the risk control mitigation plan. Okay, wanted to highlight to you when car manufacturer Toyota, Mazda, Honda, GM, they face problem in getting the semiconductor. Tesla, okay, as you read from here, they have a new record in the new record sales by Tesla because they're using the software and new microcontroller to build its vehicle. Means that beside the supply chain side, they also modified the software in producing the car, as well as to buy semiconductor company and also use new microcontrollers to build the vehicle, that they can have more sales than others companies that affected by the supply chain problem. So therefore, in conclusion, so plan early to have an option to mitigate risk and increase the awareness of risk management from top to the bottom, and getting more companies are aware about the importance of the risk management, and in a crisis beware of the danger but also recognize the opportunity, like what happened in the Tesla company. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you. I welcome question.
Thank you, Professor Yong. Your presentation is quite interesting and mostly explained about the semiconductor industry in Malaysia. It is interesting, that in Malaysia the semiconductor industry is quite a big industry. Professor Yong. From your perspective, since when the Malaysia start their semiconductor industry? Maybe you have the information.
Okay. In fact, as you know, Malaysia, we got independence in 1957, and we start to have this semiconductor companies is in the early 1970s, means about 50 years ago. Okay, when we invited Intel to start their company in the Malaysia, Intel, in 1970s. So it's 50 years. We started to have them to host them 50 years. And nowadays, just now the thing that I showed to you, that we have local company. These are the local. These are the here is a international company. Here are all these are listed here are the Malaysia company that are part of the global supply chain. And Malaysia in the past we have we make like home appliances, air conditioners, refrigerators, and we make computers, we make hard disks, and now we make components for the smartphone and the semiconductor. And this semiconductor can use not only in cars but also in the smartphone and so on. Like just now I showed to you the those are part of the supply chain of the Apple. So we also have export about a solar panel. So the E&E industry is about 40% of our export, and the know-how and the ecosystem can be used for other area beside electronic components, and also on the computers, on the phone, on the semiconductor. So it's an ecosystem that build out the being part of the important participant in the global supply chain.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Yong. So it is already 50 years, in Malaysia, developing their semiconductor industry. It is quite interesting. Okay, audience, you may, if you have any question, you may directly ask to Professor Yong, or you can chat in the chat box. We have 15 minutes for the question and answer. You may also use Bahasa Indonesia if you may prefer, and I will translate it to Professor Yong. In the chat box, there is already a question, Professor Yong. One of the question is from the Dwi Yuda, as well. All you can see the news, many company corporations seems having trouble to implement the business continuity plan during the pandemic. So based on your very own perspective, what causes a company business continuity plan cannot run optimally during the pandemic like this? I think this question is quite unique, Professor Yong, as we know that airlines industry, they have a quite challenging moment during this pandemic. Even though they have contingency plan, but some of the company for the airlines cannot survive. Maybe you have a perspective on this issue, Prof. Yong.
Okay, so we talk about the supply chain, and you can see, I think what happened now, I think in America is very severe. Okay, if you read by the news in America, is like they have they rely too many of the imported cheap product from overseas, that now the cost of the port congestion in the US that cause inflation in the US, that many of them they have to buy things and somehow they cannot buy it. The supermarket is off shelf because all being sold. I think this happened in America, that I think for developing country like us we'll see at a surprise, because I think even in Malaysia, in Indonesia, we won't see that problem. Okay, so I think it's when we talk about the risk management, I think let me share with you the earlier slide. This happened when early on when we focus too much on so-called the lean. Okay, we have this lean. We looking for the maximize the profit. Okay, we just for these are the six of the seven of the main point that when we focus too much on the lean, we forget about the risk management of it. And we have too many outsourcing, we have too many products, we have too many manufacturing at different places, and we get it from so too many different countries. We press our supplier for the low lead time that we don't want to have a lot of inventory, and we have a lean inventory that we cannot turn around. So but I think at the very last slide, I at the very last slide, we talk about the Tesla being I think Tesla being a very innovative company. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just
Okay.
read out again. One of the most impressive thing about Tesla, the Q3 report is about vehicle production and delivery result, was the fact that the companies were able to hit new records in the middle of the chip shortage crisis. The effect of the chip crisis are substantial within the fellow American automaker GM, laying the blame for its 33% year-on-year drop in sales to semiconductor supply chain. So the GM blame on the supply chain, dropped one third of the sales, but the Tesla made a record sales, even though they also face a chip problem. So Tesla's strategy is to weather the semiconductor shortage is no secret. In the Q2, the Tesla stated that its team demonstrated an unparalleled ability to react quickly and mitigate disruption to manufacturing caused by semiconductor shortages by using software and new microcontroller to build its vehicle. And the chip shortage still obviously affect Tesla, but not to the same degree of its peers in the automotive sector. So you see, when we are now in the i4.0, it's very think out of the box. And according to Tesla, they're making the car, autonomous car, like making some IT product that they can use the software to let's say they're short of certain semiconductor, they can use software to adjust, and they're still able to sell the car. Okay. And
Yeah.
also they along the line also they take over a certain company that that produce some semiconductor, and also they use alternative part, different microcontroller. So for company as a Tesla, they can make very quick decision. They can make a quick decision. They make a quick investment. Okay, and also they are looking out of the box to solve the problem instead of just waiting and waiting. So I think for as you mentioned, many company have the plan, but they do not agile to make again if they still face the challenges. I think that is make the Tesla is already outstanding in the crisis.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. Another question is there is a lot of question, Professor, in the chat books, chat
Yes.
rooms. Maybe they are interesting in your topic. Let me choose some of the question. One of the question is asking about the role of the country supporting the regulation of the supply chain. Do you think in Malaysia the government play important role in regulating the supply chain process? Maybe you have a perspective on these issues.
Okay, I just go back again to those companies just now. These are the very important company in Malaysia. For Malaysia, I think in many countries also you have this national industrial policy.
Yeah.
Okay, and industrial policy it give the direction on how to give incentive to companies to grow. Okay, in here the at the wafer fabrication actually we have this Silterra Malaysia. Actually is a government linked company, but unfortunately before the COVID they are not performing well. Actually now we sold to one of the Foxconn group.
Yeah.
You see the Foxconn group making the Apple phone, they buy wafer company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Malaysia we started this wafer fabrication etc., but we cannot make profit. We could, because of the GLC. Sometimes people have this the civil servant mindset. They do not look at profit.
Yeah.
Okay, and end out we got to sold this company. And for others, all others are the local company, local. They grow from the small and medium enterprises. And what the policy is, the government give incentive in terms of, like, let's say they use the latest software. They use IT investment. Let's say the investment on the robotic. They invest on the new system. The government give the incentive of the tax holidays. Okay, they give the tax holidays as well. And if they can, let's say our local company, they buy over a supply chain company, another company that making the a company in the supply chain, the government also may provide some grant to support the company to take over another a player in the supply chain. So the government support in the sense that to give the tax holidays and also to have some grant for them to strengthen their supply chain.
Okay. Yes, exactly. I think same in here in Indonesia, the government give an incentive, yeah, for the industry in terms of during the pandemic they need to survive and also to invest more machine and operating engine so they can more actively again, yeah, like before the pandemic. Another question, Professor Yong from our audience is that in the future, what aspect of the supply chain within the organization that will permanently change after the pandemic is over? So I think the pandemics also teach the company, what has changed during the supply chain context. From your perspective, maybe any opinion?
Okay, so just now at the beginning of the sharing, we talked about the source of the risk. Okay, and
Yeah.
I think after this pandemic, people will have more thinking about the risk management in terms of, in the past we focus a lot on the lean. Okay, but now on, I think people talking about how to balance the lean and also the resilient, as well as the more use of the information technology. Because I think in Asian country we are very traditional. We want the see the worker to come to our plant, our company every day. Okay, so but with this pandemic, I think we have no choice to allow the workers or the employees to work from home. And therefore this is the area that the company have to rethink about the risk management, their mitigation plan, as well as the business continuation plan. So, like what you see just now, in many area of the identification, for example, in your production process, you talk about the raw material, you talk about the procurement. So in the past, that you may be because of I let's say I order from just one source, because then they give us a lot of a big discount because we buy the volume. But now you may have to think about it. You must have a second supplier in hand. Means that your approved supplier list must have some people in the second or third. When the first supplier cannot supply, do you have the approved supplier at the second, the third approved supplier, that you can switch to another raw material supplier, for example? Okay, another things that may change is, I think, the more give more agility to the employees. Of course, production, you need to present in the company to produce a product. But if your company is about services, if you are the say some certain engineer, software engineer of the company, then you may want to encourage them to work from home, and also as well as to have a flexi hours. So especially during COVID, we know it happened like cluster of the patient. Sometimes the whole unit is got affected with the COVID-19 section in the company. So therefore, company will have to build up the team A, team B, that you do not have put the whole all people at the same group, that if one person infected with the COVID, everybody got infected. So These are the human resource management side, and also like the supplier management that will the company, in order to have a sustainable operation, then have to rethink about it to strengthen your risk management for more resilient in your business.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Au Yong Hui. One last question, because the time is up. There is one question from the audience about the how can we access the maturity of the supply chain risk management in our company? Because some company has different ability on accepting the fact that their supply chain risk management is vary between each company. So from your perspective, how can they access the maturity of the supply chain process?
Okay, so first about the risk management, again, is the decision from your top management. How serious is the top management, your general manager, your managing director, your CEO want to perform the risk management? Because when you do the risk management, you remember you have the mitigation plan. Okay, you need to invest. You need to invest on maybe your facilities. You need to invest on your people. So once with this risk management and also approved by the CEO that they want to make the investment on it, then each department have to come up the activities, then assess, quantify the risk, have some the mitigation plan, and then do the review every yearly. Okay, and also yearly, and also if you have new product, then you have to do the risk assessment again. So the company must make this the risk control very important task, that this document. And just now I mentioned about you talk about the criteria. So remember we have this the metrics here. Okay, these
Yes.
metrics, somehow we need to quantify it, right? But we also need to have this, how to give the score. For example, single supplier. Okay, this is activity, this is the risk, this is the event. Then what is probability happen something to the company? Okay, this is could be a score of 1 to 3. This is score 1, score 2, score 3. And what is the business impact? This is important supplier, score 1, score 2, score 3. Then you, the product 3 by 3 is a 9. Then each activity you have this the quantification of your risk. Okay, but as we, you have a right, you ask a right question, what is the criteria? So some company may use it a 3 by 3, or some company may use a maximum score of 5 or 7 or 9. It depends on the company. Okay, as well as for the event of the probability and business impact, it involves some of the subjective judgment. So therefore, there is a no right or wrong, but must be justified for the people who make the judgment. And it is good that you have another group of people to do the risk management. Just now, I think one of the surveys say that they have some risk management unit. Okay, because if you do your own risk management, somehow you won't see any problem. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you need to have better to have a team to review what you have done the assessment, because sometimes you think that you are very efficient, you are very perfect. So so the company, the CEO, the top management team have to make a decision to how
Yes.
to invest on the risk management.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Professor Au Yong Hui. Your explanation give us an enlightenment about the risk management in your topic. Apologize for all the participants whose the question is not yet answered by Professor Au Yong Hui. I would like to ask your permission. Is it possible if the participant email you? So if the participant have the inquiry or the question related with the topic, the participant can email Professor Au Yong Hui ini. The email is, I put it in the chat box, so participant can ask directly to the Prof. Au Yong Hui. And as a moderator, I already finished my role, and it is an honor, Professor Au Yong Hui, to have you with us It will be great if in the future you will come to Universitas Airlangga and give a lecture, not online, but physically. And I believe that Dr. Yeti, during her closing speech, will invite you to come to our university. Thank you from me for you being one of our guests. And the session I will give to Dr. Yeti to close the session. Thank you, Dr. Au Yong Hui.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arya. And on behalf of Department of Management and especially for Magister Management Program, yeah, I would like to thank you for Prof. Au Yong Hui. I think I enjoy your sharing. Yeah, I think it's very interesting and very insightful for us. Yeah, about supply chain risk management. Thank you. Maybe for the next, yeah. I've already said in a beginning that maybe we can do a joint research or some lecturing again, maybe Prof. Au Yong Hui. I think that's a very interesting thing that we can do in the future. Okay, thank you, Prof. Au Yong Hui, for your sharing material. I think it's very, very interesting. Dan untuk mahasiswa, mahasiswa semuanya, jadi ini adalah salah satu topik terakhir yang akan menjadi bahan untuk materi UTS nanti ya. I don't know, maybe Prof. Au Yong Hui can share your material or your PPT for our student.
Okay, I will send to you your team. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Directly email to me, Professor.
Yeah, you can send by email to Mr. Tantowi. Okay, thank you again for Prof. Au Yong Hui. Oke, sekali lagi terima kasih pada mahasiswa yang sudah hadir dan berpartisipasi di sini. Mungkin tidak semua pertanyaan terjawab ya, karena memang waktu yang cukup terbatas, dan mohon maaf untuk satu pembicara lagi ada kendala ya, mendadak beliau tidak bisa hadir untuk menjadi pembicara pada sore kali ini. Tapi sekali lagi kalau ada pertanyaan yang terkait bisa email ke Prof. Au Yong Hui lewat email. Ya, jadi sekali lagi untuk materi ujiannya untuk UTS mulai dari chapter 1 sampai dengan materi dari Prof. Au Yong Hui. Oke, itu saja dari saya. Thank you again for Prof. Au Yong Hui and Mr. Arya to be moderator for this session. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Yeti. Thank you, Prof. Au Yong Hui. Looking
you,
forward to discuss with you
Thank
again.
you, Bapak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep in touch.
Keep in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Terima kasih semuanya. Salam. Good evening. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.